You're listening to Season 2 of the Mies podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level, day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show.
With every stroke of the pencil, I'm giving you folks a glimpse into my experiences.
Hello, ladies and gentle people. Today's guest is a multiple James Beard nominee and an incredible chef and restaurant owner, operator, Chef Jesse Ito. Jesse and I have met each other a few times over the years at some events, and I really was grateful to get this opportunity to learn more about his background and what he's doing and his restaurants. There's a really cool backstory in that the majority of his time in restaurants was spent at his father's sushi spot in Jersey, a really well-known sushi spot. So he came up learning at a very young age how to make sushi from his father and spent years doing that. And then, of course, went off on his own to start his restaurants. And incredibly, today, actually, he has his father working with him at the restaurant, which is a pretty awesome dynamic. So we spoke a lot about what it was like to learn from his parents and the skills that he took with him and the things that maybe he sort of had to adjust and change when starting off on his own. And what it's like, of course, having your parents work with you in your business today. Jesse also experienced some struggles with alcohol abuse in the past, and we got a little bit personal today talking about how he sort of overcame that and the ways generally in which he manages stress today. We talk a bit about therapy and get a little personal there, but it was a really enjoyable conversation. And to be honest with you, on top of all of that, just hearing about his restaurant in Philly, like I was just so excited to go and eat there. I'm sure if you haven't been there, definitely go check it out. If you're in the area, it sounds really incredible. He has an omakase spot that you walk through his izakaya spot to get to, and he's opening another spot now. So I can't wait to get out there again. And as always, I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. What's the new concept, by the way?
Oh, it's another izakaya.
Oh.
Yeah. So have you been to Royal?
Dude, my first time ever in Philly, which I didn't realize it, was when I went to the chef conference. And we went to like 2 places that I didn't even, pick some of my team picked. So I've been to like 2 restaurants in Philly, but I was looking at your menu and I was like, fuck, man, I really want to go to this place. My wife and I actually might do a date night.
Yeah.
In a week or 2 and just go, because, it's not that far to Philly, and just go to Philly and grab a hotel room. But no, I haven't been yet.
Yeah. So there's 2 parts. There's a duality to it. There's an izakaya, and once you go past the northern curtains, there's a omakase, but it's very integrated together, which is what I like. But the new concept, the new izakaya is a little bigger. It won't have any sushi, so that's the main difference.
Oh, so just the izakaya, not the omakase in the back.
Yeah, so it'll have more cooked items, more.
Yeah.
There'll still be some like raw dishes, but no sushi rice, which is a big factor. So no rolls, no chirashi, no stuff like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're going to talk about that today. But by the way, I did want to ask you, I know you went to Rutgers.
Yeah.
And got a marketing degree. I love that, the walking past the izakaya into the omakase. Have you ever been to, well, it's not open anymore, but there's a place called Angel Share in New York City.
In Village.
You would have to walk through the izakaya to get to the speakeasy bar. And it's the first thing I thought of when I was looking at, at your restaurant. I was like, I fucking love that. I love that idea. It's such a cool, it's almost got like PDT vibe of you go into the phone booth and you get in the bar. Was that the original, when you first opened, did you have that premise right away?
Yeah. The original, the initial conversations with my partners, which was when I was I think 24, 25 when we were talking about it. And I know. We have a brick facade on the front of our building, and we were discussing how much money it's going to be to make it nicer. Mm-hmm. Put some either antique brick or something, right? And I was just why don't we just keep it as is and just throw a lantern up? And it's kind of you either know or you don't know. You walk past. It's very nondescript. And the first couple of years, I'll never forget, people, and even now it still happens, people are standing outside not sure if that's a restaurant.
Yeah. I love brick though, man. My first restaurant that I opened in Brooklyn, it was drywall, and then we ripped out the drywall, and we realized it was all brick.
Yeah.
And like we didn't have a ton of money to open, so my partner and I, we cleaned and pointed all the brick, and then just painted it white. And white brick is like really sick, but it's such a good material. Yeah. Well, anyways, I think what was super interesting that I learned. So you worked with your dad for a very long time, and I want to know what that was like, just growing up working for your dad in a restaurant, and then he started working with you at this restaurant. So maybe to start though, like, what was it like working for your dad at Fuji for? I mean, I think you started when you were like 14, right?
14, yeah.
All the way up to making sushi, which, by the way, it's like, I know it's super hard to even get an apprenticeship to make sushi. So that must have been pretty amazing and serendipitous that you're able to do that. Like, what was it like working for him?
Well, I mean, besides him being this old Japanese chef, I guess he wasn't that old when we started learning. But
what does that mean? Like,
I mean, it's Japanese culture. It's just it's very intense, and it's you get like punished almost for when you make mistakes. I'm sure it's the same with French kitchens. Like it's old school cooking. It's old school kitchen. Mm-hmm. It's all about precision and methodology and philosophy and yeah, you're working with really expensive ingredients. So if you mess up, it's a big deal. So you have to do the same thing over and over again for years, like washing rice and cutting vegetables or making tamago. Beyond that, he's my dad, so there's all that it's layered into that because there's resentments and there's like you're more comfortable with each other. I could talk back because I'm his son. It's a little different, right? But it was good at the end of it because he couldn't fire me and I couldn't walk out, and there were moments where we definitely got to that point. It's really hard.
That dynamic must be really difficult. I mean, I can't imagine, like, I come from those kinds of kitchens where you get plates thrown at you and, yelled at. And the idea that that person doing that is your dad and you don't really have a choice adds this whole other layer to it that must have been, I mean, even as a kid, must have been pretty difficult.
Yeah, it was intense. But also there's a whole nother part. Like when he brought me on at 14, I was a dishwasher, and that was when my parents like officially got divorced.
Yeah.
And he wasn't at the house anymore. So I think a large part of it was he wanted to see me more.
Yeah. Did he ever say that to you, that was something?
No, but it just like the timing, like it made sense.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden I had to go work one day a week, or I was offered the job. I forget if it was a choice or not, but
yeah,
I had to go work one day a week starting at 14, and then it started from there. So it was a good way to spend time again, but it's a lot of time, and in that environment, my mom was there too. So they were divorced, owning that restaurant.
That's nuts.
I know, it was nuts. There were definitely some hard times, but we got through it, and I learned a lot.
What are the biggest takeaways that you obviously now you have your own restaurant, so it's not like you worked in your dad's, restaurant and then started a different kind of business. You literally, it's pretty linear. What are the biggest takeaways that you're sort of like using today?
Yeah, I mean, to start to frame it was a small Japanese BYO, and Royal Sushi Izakaya is not a very small restaurant. We seat about 70 people, and we have a ton of alcohol. We have a booming bar program. So one of the big takeaways was that when you open a restaurant or a business, the business plan has to be bigger thinking of what's going to happen later. Because when it came time, when I started getting approached to open Royal, my parents, they could still do the job, and they were still relatively young, but there was a thought in my mind of like, what's going to happen? Because I could see it just getting really hard. And I just saw, if I stayed there, what am I going to do? Am I going to step in my dad's, my shoes and take care and run the restaurant like he had run for all these decades? Or am I going to do my own thing there, which I feel like was harder? So it's really about being very business oriented and kind of having a game plan of how the financial strategy of business, right? From the get-go. Because there are times where I think we're poor. I don't remember, not poor, but we're definitely hurting. It was a small restaurant, and there were, especially during 2008 crisis, like the 2008, 2009, 2010, it was really hard. I'll never forget. And I just wanted to avoid things like that, or just having such a small restaurant where we had to work all the time. We were open every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. It was just me, my mom, and my dad on some of those like holidays.
Jeez.
We worked 6 days a week. My dad worked every day because he went in on the Monday we're closed to like prep more.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way to not work. There's no flexibility because it's so small. So, you know, our restaurant, with the way we staff, we can fortunately, there's some flexibility.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was just talking to someone today who has a really great bakery, and we were having this conversation about, well, you know, I just want to try and figure out how to have one more day off where I can spend with my kids. And it is a tough, like, hump to get over when you have a business, to think, I'm going to need to spend some more money and figure out some more top line so that I can actually step back. And I feel like, yeah, I'm assuming, you know, with your parents, there's that like level of, you know, I don't know if it's fear or, you know, trepidation of like, no, this is what we do. And it just means we have to work all the time. It sounds like you took that away from them of like, maybe there's a little bit more we can do.
Yeah. I mean, I still have that old school mentality ingrained in me. I mean, they're both immigrants. They came here and they opened a restaurant, and they've worked their ass off to get, you know, to support me and my sister. And I'm extremely appreciative of them. Working with them, I saw it every day. And that grit is built into me. And I needed that to open Royal. I definitely did. But we're 8 years into Royal now, and, you know, businesses evolve, and it can't be like that forever. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do agree. I think it has to be like that for a while.
It does.
You know, for it to really work. You have to really, I mean, any restaurant that's going 0 to 1, like, it's just a grind for a long time. And then you do have to have some sort of, you know, light at the end tunnel of like, once it's proven that it works as a concept, that you start to, you know, be able to figure out ways to step back. But yeah, there is no way around it. And I think it's an attribute that anybody, I don't know if you agree, like if you start a restaurant, if you think you're just going to, you know, figure out ways to scale day one and just chill, not chill, but like even just work normal hours, it's just not a thing.
Yeah. Like I mean, you always hear about it. Someone's like, someone wants to retire and open a restaurant, and you're just like, that's the opposite of retirement. Yeah. That is like going back to work times 100. I mean, I say these things where it's nice to like kind of find some flexibility of time to go away. But at the same time, what I have also learned of just owning a restaurant is you have to accept that you are always going to work. Like if you're ever short-staffed or you need to train someone, like you have to work. And it also empowers you, like being the chef owner. I can't be tied to someone like having to be there, right? If someone can't, like, either has to leave or for whatever reason, like I can't be tied to that. And it's really important that I can always step in. Yeah. I can always like train up people, or, you know, fill in at least temporarily for one position. You need to be able to do that in a restaurant.
Is your dad still working with you today?
Yeah, he's still there. He works like limited hours, and he actually makes a Tamagoyaki every morning.
Yeah, I saw that. What's it like working with your dad now? It's not that the tables are turned, but, you know, it's certainly a different dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, we've all changed over these 8 years, I do have to say, for the better. And he's much happier these days. He has no stress. He has no like anxiety about the business. He doesn't really know. I don't really tell him any of the issues going on. Mm-hmm. You know, there's always something going on.
Yeah.
He doesn't hear any of that. So he's just like completely stress free. He comes in, he like, you know, does a couple things for a couple hours, and then he goes home. He doesn't stay the whole service, and he's not there most nights.
That's great. I mean, it must be, almost like a dream for him, you know, because he still gets to do like the thing that he loves, but he's not tied to the other part of the operation.
I mean, it took him time to adjust because he used to be the main star of the show, right? Yeah. And the only way to be able to do this is where you're not, right? If you can leave at any time, you're not doing the omakase. You're not like, you know, running the menu. You're not training people every day. But he still, you know, inputs his wisdom where he can with some of our, you know, young chefs. And I can see that he enjoys it, and he enjoys his time away. But it was hard. I knew it was hard for him to adjust to to enjoy the time away, right? Because if you've been working your whole life every day with no time to yourself, like you have to learn how to live outside of work.
Yeah, it's really
But once
hard.
he did, he's happy. He's ready to go. He's like, all right, I'm leaving. Bye. I'm gonna go tend to my gardens or see my grandkids. Or
it's funny that when you're working 100-hour weeks every week for years, I don't know, about you, but I remember times where like I would have like, a day off or like, God forbid, maybe more than a day off. And it's almost like that feeling, I mean, this is a terrible analogy actually, just like when you get out of prison, but like, what do? I don't know. I'll go stage somewhere, I guess, because I don't know what to do with my time on my day off because all I know is working all the time. It's like you have to learn how to like live and enjoy things again when you're working that much all the time.
yeah, I mean, I feel like so we were talking about that grit and like that like entrepreneurial, just you have to crush it when you open. You just have to work all the time. It's hard to turn that off when you don't need it, right? And like you just said, there are moments where you have downtime and you're just fidgeting. You're just like organizing things. You're just looking at your calendar, filling it up more, and you're just you feel useless when you're not doing. And that's been the biggest thing for me to learn how to adjust for that when I don't have to do things. But for the most part, I'm still like that. I mean, even my days off, I'm organizing, I'm cleaning, I don't stop, but I can if I need to. And it's taken a long time to do that. And I'm sure you've, faced the same thing.
Yeah, I still have this problem. I mean, even though like I don't really do anything day to day with the restaurants anymore, I have this business. I work all the time still, partly because we're still somewhat of a younger business, and I just have that same kind of maniacal kind of approach. I had a therapy session last week, and it was a new therapist, and it was the first time she was asking these questions, and I've always thought like like why do I always work so hard? Why am I always like doing more things? And I always thought it's because I have this sort of crazy ambition, which we do, right? But she's like, sounds like you're like running away from something really painful. I wonder how many of us that do this are actually doing that, are actually running away from something, from like our childhood that was really painful. I mean, your dad and mom, I'm sure, like, that's not easy immigrating to like a new country. I mean, maybe they were, who knows? But I ask myself often, like, why do I work like this? I don't necessarily need to, but I don't know if you have the same thoughts sometimes.
Yeah. There's probably something that happened to me at some point in my life that made me want to, I can never stop trying to improve things. I think that's a good thing and that's a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't not have it especially for what you do and for a lot of things. All right. So we'll diverge from that for a minute. Okay. Because I want to start talking about some sushi things because I have like a million questions, but your dad is like as a master at Tamagoyaki. Yeah. For people listening, everybody probably knows what it is. The cooked egg that you grill, but like what makes a great Tamagoyaki? Like how do you make sure that it's great? Like what are things that like most of us probably don't know that other than like, of course you need to make it a million times over the course of your life to like perfect it. What are things that we don't know about making a Tamagoyaki that we probably should know?
Well, we use dashi in ours, so there's several different versions, and some people use like some are more like a cake version, or they use like shrimp paste or flour paste, or I'm sorry, fish paste that they kind of put in a mortar and mix it up. But we use the dashi version. That's the one I grew up eating. But I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. The main thing to get really good at it is doing it over and over and over again every day. My dad is 100 times better than me because he still does it every day. You need the Tamagoyaki square copper pan. That's really important too, just for heat distribution. And you need to regulate your heat when you're doing it because you don't want to brown the egg, but at the same time, it needs to cook and you're essentially flipping it into layers. And you need a lot of oil also to do this. But the main...
What kind of oil do you use? Just regular oil?
You just mix oil. Yeah, blended oil. The main thing is just doing it all the time. It's that motion. It's that flipping motion that's really hard. It's to flip it on itself. Yeah. You get a really clean layers and that perfect like rectangular shape.
Yeah.
It's just that motion and you just have to do it a lot.
And the dashi that you use, are you using like a karabushi or like what type of katsuboshi are you using to make the dashi?
Yeah, there's anchovies in there. There's, we use kombu and yeah. That's what we use for the whole restaurant. Yeah.
Whoa, that's cool. You use anchovies in all your dashi?
Almost all of it, yeah.
Wow, that's cool. That feels like I thought that was more of like a Korean thing.
No, it's we use it. Yeah, it has good
That's
flavor.
cool.
Not all dashi. I mean, like some of my sauces, like it's just the katsubushi and the kombu. But
Yeah,
like for like making the soups and stuff, there's some anchovy mixed in. Some mushrooms, yeah.
Last year I had the guys from Japanese Pantry on the show, and I've been buying like the liquid shiokoji from them for a long time. I don't know if you ever used it. It's amazing. It's like the only place you can get this liquid shiokoji.
Yeah, shiokoji is flavor.
Yeah. The liquid stuff's great because I just put it in I put it in eggs. I put it in sauces.
It's like a cheat code.
Yeah. But they were sort of like going. I didn't know nearly enough about katsubushi until they started telling me that there's the smoked one, there's the smoked and fermented, the arabushi and karabushi, and they're very different. And so then I bought like all these different kinds of katsubushi to make dashi, and I'm like, holy shit, yeah, they're completely different. Like the flavor profiles are like totally different, and like the one that you would use to make like a chawanmushi is totally different from the one you would use to make like a miso soup. And I had no idea, which is something I love about Japanese cuisine is there's not a lot of products, but the products that they have, they go really, really deep into.
Yeah, they go, yeah, there's a lot of options.
Yeah. Well, I had some questions for you about that. So like, I always remember my first great sushi meal ever, this was in like 2005, like after we were working at Cafe Gray, and once in a while we'd go to this place called Sushi Seki in New York.
Oh yeah. I never went there. They were open late night, right?
Yeah. Well, they ended up opening another one on 23rd Street, but Seki, the first one was uptown, and Seki would be there. And I just remember the first time he handed me this spicy scallop roll, and or like the hand roll,
Yeah.
And it was probably one of the best I've ever eaten. And I never had somebody do that. I didn't know anything about omakase. This was like, I was like 21. And the other thing that I always remember is like every course, they would tell us soy sauce or no soy sauce. Like, don't use soy sauce or use soy sauce.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they would swap the soy sauce. I was curious, like, do you have a particular soy sauce that you like or that you use, that you give your guests for what they're dipping their sushi in?
Yeah. I mean, most sushi chefs, we use something called like nikiri shoyu. It means like sweeter soy sauce, but it's augmented. So I get like a base. I use Yamasa for everything. That's the brand I like.
Yep.
And you can get different kinds of soy sauce from them. So I use one that's it's not necessarily less sodium, but it's not as like salty.
Mm-hmm.
And then I add like mirin and sake and other things.
Oh, interesting. So the thing that they're dipping in. Gotcha.
Yeah. That's why when you kind of look at sushi, at my sushi, you can always tell if like it's just like straight soy sauce because it gets really dark.
Yeah.
Or it's like kind of like this, like it looks a little glazed, like a glistening. That's nikiri shoyu. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the secret sauce.
All right. So you make like it's almost like a marinade, right? So it's mirin.
I mean, you can add other things, but usually it's like a mixture of other things mixed in. Yeah.
And then how about for the marinated rice? Chorizo is what it's called, right?
Sharizu, yeah.
Chorizo. Like, what kind of vinegar do you use for that?
I use akazu. So it's red rice vinegar. It's like made with sake leaves. So it just takes a lot longer. It's more expensive, but it has this like umami rich flavor to it. Mm-hmm. That's why you see some sushi rice that's a little brown.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And then I also use, for the izakaya, we use just regular rice vinegar. We use miskan.
Yeah.
But that's also mixed with like salt, sugar, and some other things sometimes. It depends on the recipe. I have different recipes for different like seasons, or different if it's for the izakaya or it's for the omakase.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So for the omakase, when you're making the marinade, the chorizo, like, do you heat the vinegar with the salt and sugar?
I used to do that, and my dad used to do that, but these days I don't heat it up anymore.
Yeah.
I actually just mix it all together.
You just let it dissolve.
I let it dissolve. The mixing kind of, I felt like it sometimes takes away some of the pungency of the vinegar.
Yeah, you lose some of the acid. Do you have any kombu in there when you're letting it like sit?
I do add a little kombu for like a day, and then if you let it sit too long, it gets sticky.
Yeah, cool. Any preference on sesame oils? Toasted, non-toasted, or the types that you like?
Yeah, I used what's the brand? I've used this for so long. I don't even look at it. It's in the metal tin. Kadoya, yeah. Mm-hmm. You've probably seen it. It's always in that tin. Like that is the sesame oil. I think sushi restaurant uses or every Japanese restaurant uses. It's like my whole life I grew up with that. I think I have one in my apartment too.
Yeah, that's the one I always have in my house as well. I tried this golden sesame oil. Comes from Osaka. I forget the producer's name. Comes from that same company, Japanese Pantry. Now I feel like I'm just shouting out this company all the time. But
I'll have to look them up.
You should definitely check out. Yeah, Wataman is the company. It's amazing, man. It's the best. I mean, they have a golden sesame oil, they have a toasted sesame oil, and they have a white sesame oil. And they also have the sesame paste, which is kind of like tahini, but like way better. And they have a black sesame paste. Yeah, this company Wataman is really cool. They're out of Osaka. I'll shoot you a note with a link to the website. And if you ever want to chat with it,
are they like Chris, a distributor, Greg? Like MTC?
Yeah, they're out of San Francisco. These guys, Chris and Greg. Greg actually had a Japanese restaurant in San Francisco. They spend a lot of time going back and forth to Japan, and they just have like amazing products.
I'll have to check it out, definitely.
Yeah, not cheap. I mean, actually, some of it actually is pretty affordable, but really, really good.
Yeah.
So I read something when you were talking about uni, like you're like tasting the uni. I love uni. It's one of my favorite things. But like, I was curious if you had a preference.
I get all the unis.
Yeah. Do you have a preference of like Maine or Santa Barbara or Japanese? And also like, I saw something where like you taste it every day. Like,
oh yeah. So when I worked at my dad's restaurant, we used to do live uni Thursdays because that's when it would come in.
Came in live?
Yeah, from Santa Barbara. I had to open them all and I had to taste them all because at that time about like a quarter or third were throwaway. They were just like either really bitter or floral, or the texture was just really broken. You don't know until you open it. So once you taste it every day, you start to build patterns. I mean, uni that's going to taste good is usually like really vibrant yellow or orange, preferably like golden orange. That's probably means it's going to be sweet. And then the texture should look like puffed up, like bouncy almost. If it looks a little like loose, it's probably not going to be a great texture in your mouth. But if it's like pale, that generally indicates it's going to be bitter. It's not all the time. Yeah. So I had to taste it every day for a long time, the live uni. But that was from California. My favorite uni that I like to use is aka uni. It's a red uni from Kyushu, from southern Japan. To me, it just has like a more layered flavor. It's not quite as sweet as like Hokkaido or Murasaki. Murasaki uni is the purple uni, and Hokkaido uni is usually Bafun uni, which is like black. It's a black sea urchin, and aka is red. So there's like three main Japanese uni. We, for the most part, use the Bafun Hokkaido uni the most. It's the most consistent, sweetest. You can always get it. In terms of Maine or California, I've had really good product from both parts, more so California, but I don't use either because it's just inconsistent to get. And I need it for my menu. So if I get a batch that's like really bitter, really broken, or really like wet, I just can't use it. And then my menu's like screwed up that whole week. So I always get the Japanese uni. I'll just pay more for consistency, quality.
100%. Yeah. When you were getting the live uni back in the day, like, would you then cure it?
No, we would serve it that night. That's why it was live uni Thursdays. You can, they sell something, I forget because I haven't used it since my dad's restaurant. I think it's an agar. It's like these little agar gel things that you put in water. And if you put the uni in it, it puffs it up and it like holds it so it doesn't melt. And I think most uni you get has actually been treated that way.
Yeah. That's why I have terrible memories of like, this was like 20 some years ago. I worked at Oceana and we would have those like, the things that you use to cut open the uni.
Or you use it.
It's like it was scissors. No, yeah, this thing. It was like it looked like a pair of scissors, but it was like you use it with two hands and you just like cut it open like that.
Yeah.
And now I have to Google because I distinctly remember this thing, and I hated opening the uni, but I also I remember so like vividly liking the trays of uni way better than this live uni, because the live uni would go on the the seafood platters. It just didn't taste the same. I was like, why? It's like. It felt like almost like, when you get cod and you have to kind of salt it a little bit, or some fish where you have to like salt a little bit to sort of take out some of the moisture. It just felt like it wasn't as tight. I hated opening that stuff.
Yeah, it's like melting. It's like melting in room temp.
Yeah, now I have to look up these uni openers. I'm like Googling it right now.
But these days it's really hard to do live uni because it's more than half end up being throwaway. So I haven't done it for years because the yield is just bad and it's so terrible.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I am also like super curious about, am I crazy? Because I'm not Googling this and I can't find it anywhere.
Uni shears?
I'm gonna have to look this up again. But anyways, how do you manage all this, like the waste in a sushi restaurant? You're getting fish flown in. You in particular, obviously, like many restaurants, you're getting stuff flown in from Japan, I assume. And so you're getting fish in whatever, if it's every day, every couple of days, and you're making a bunch of rice. I think you make like 60 pounds of rice a day. Like how do you manage the waste? I mean, I know you know how many people are coming in every day. So is that how you do that? Is you're very particular about like the weight of every single fish that comes in, and you know that's exactly how much we'll need?
Yeah, I mean, for the ordering, if you look at my order list, I do try to specify weight. They can't always give me the weight I want for a fish, but I know relatively like, this fish this Notoguro is like a pound and a quarter, or, so you can specify weight. That's one thing. And quantity. I know how many fish I need for the omakase every night. But there is going to be waste, and that's why having the izakaya is like paramount for this, like this duality. We use all any fish I don't use, I use in the izakaya. And any fish we have left over at the end of the night from the izakaya, we use in the industry chirashi bowl that's available for takeout, which is like scraps of
That's awesome.
A fish put into a pine container with rice, like pickled jalapenos, soy sauce, sesame oil, scallion, and like spicy cod roe, and that's like served for $20. We sell
that's
for 20
so cool.
bucks. And there's like, if you actually count what's in it, it should be worth like $35, $40.
Yeah. So that's like the next day, like lunch, people can get like come in and get.
It's not lunch, it's just takeout, but it's all like, it's available as long as we have the product to use it. But it's any fish left over from the day before, or just scrap pieces, like end pieces, imperfect pieces. Because for the chirashi, sashimi, and omakase, we're using all prime cuts.
Yeah. So sushi is a pretty precious craft. I think that from an outsider looking in, it seems like it's one of those things that, the technique and the time spent is really important to assessing like a sushi joint. And a lot of these, especially when you get like the upper echelon of omakase, like one, there's almost like this, just like this similarity of all of them, right? They're all, it's somewhat of a similar experience, but they also like have a very particular perception of what good sushi is supposed to be. Like, I'm curious, you like, American born, obviously spent a lot of time in a sushi joint and are doing your own omakase now. Like, I'm just curious if like you feel like this tension between like classical techniques and a modern approach to omakase, and like, do you deal with this ever? Does this ever like become part of your world where you have to sort of deal with this tension?
Yeah, definitely. No, that is my world. I mean, I'm always dealing with this. What is traditional? What is like contemporary? What is untraditional? Like, I'm glad we don't really throw around the word fusion anymore that much. I feel like the food world has kind of grown out of that. It's worldly. We're using techniques in food from all over the world, as long as it's not done in a tacky way. So yeah, I'm American born. My mom is Korean. I grew up eating Japanese and Korean food. My parents owned a Japanese restaurant, and my dad was a celebrated Japanese sushi chef. So I have all these parts that make me and my food what it is. And for a long time, I try to stick to pretty traditional sushi and the experience of what you would kind of get at most places. But I would say in the last couple of years, especially in the last year, I have kind of diverged, and there's definitely some more integration from just my experience growing up and just from like world travels. I can't necessarily call it traditional omakase anymore because it's not, but I still retain the elements that like make it a good omakase. The rice has to be really good, and the fish has to be really good. I mean, obviously it's mostly about the rice.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what sushi is about. So that as long as I got that, I feel like I can, the smaller plates or composed dishes, I can kind of have some more fun with, as long as it's seemingly Japanese or it like retains a Japanese feeling and the ingredients or the approach to it.
What changed? You said all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, it probably was gradual, but like something changed. You're like, okay, now I want to diverge and I'm going to start doing more of what I think. Was there some impetus or the catalyst that was like helped you make that move?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big thing because before like last year, at most there's like maybe one composed plate at most on the menu, and then all nigiri and like a temaki, a hand roll. I have so many regulars and people looking to come in, they're so used to that formula. And that is a safe formula, right? And once you start doing composed plates, people expect those to change more rapidly than nigiri. Nigiri, like I could honestly serve the same nigiri. If you go to a sushi restaurant or a sushi omakase and it's all nigiri, like you can get the same pieces forever and you'll be happy because nigiri is it's perfect food. It's a perfect bite of food if done.
As long as you eat it on time.
Yeah, you got to eat it quickly, one bite. Yeah, I would say like last fall, I mean, I started getting some of the best rice I've worked with. My rice technique, I'm happier than ever. You know, you never stop trying to tweak it. But I feel like I'm very confident in making really good rice, and I'm using really great vinegars, and like I'm super confident with all the fish I get and how I source it, and how now I'm dry aging tuna and things like that. So the nigiri, like in terms of creativity, you can only do so much. You can't, when you layer things too far, like too many things on top or too many things underneath, it just it diverges from what nigiri is, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's fish, rice, soy sauce, and maybe one or two toppings, if at most. But once you do too many, like it's just so far out what sushi is. And it's already, like we said, it's a perfect bite. So that kind of pushed me to start putting out some more composed plates just to have more fun and to also change the experience for my diners. And yeah, to like integrate some of my other experiences. Like, I had this bibimbap dish on the menu last season. I mean, it was very Japanese, but it also felt kind of Korean. But I grew up eating that, and you can't do that with a piece of nigiri. You need to do a dish like that.
This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Mies. Mies helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Mies is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Mies in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices because Mies will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Mies podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Mies. It sounds like confidence was a big piece of what changed it, which makes a ton of sense, right? You have to master something before you can, think about changing it. You have to understand how to make the perfect mother sauce before you decide to, make your own version of it. And so it seems like maybe you hit an arc, in your career where you felt confident enough, like, okay, I feel good enough about all this that I can start to, iterate a bit.
I think that's a good way of putting it. And also that I'm 3.5 years sober now. I know we might talk about that a bit today. And like, I feel like that arc of sobriety and how much I've changed since that point has also contributed to just me being more comfortable with who I am and who I can put myself. What I put on a plate is me, right?
Yeah.
Because pre-COVID, I gotta be honest with you, I was much more obsessed about just being very Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Like just my appearance and the way I marketed myself. Like I am half Korean and I am American born and yeah, my dad is very Japanese and he taught me everything I know, but that's not exactly who I am. So, since that point 3.5 years ago, there's been a whole kind of regrowth, I feel like, of just like understanding who I am. And that comes out in my food, obviously.
Yeah. And it's also I'm sure, a huge part of why your food continues to get more compelling and better because you have your perspective on it. Sushi is one of those things there are other parts of cuisine that are similar to this where once you get to the best of a nigiri, at a perfect bite of nigiri of the yellowtail, that's that. And then what? Like, what's the difference between, and I'm, by the way, this might be a terrible thing to say, but like, what's the difference between masas and narisawas? Are they the same piece of nigiri? And is there some tiny little divergence that most people might not pick up, So with things like this, I feel like it's such a huge advantage as well to just have some other completely different, perspective that you can bring to this, because otherwise it's just the same thing for generations.
Yeah, I mean, that is what made Nobu who he is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be Nobu and own hotels in like, I don't know, over 25 restaurants across the world. That's not my
No,
goal.
yeah, you're still young, man.
But he has so much Peruvian, South American influence in his food.
Yeah.
And like Japanese food traditionally has no heat. There's no like jalapeno or serrano pepper or ají amarillo. There's no spices. It's just wasabi and maybe like spicy mustard, right? There's no yuzu kosho. That's like the spiciest thing you're gonna get, right? But
I love yuzu kosho.
I do too. It's also another cheat code. But Nobu-san, like he completely changed it, and they go so well together. Those flavors. Now everyone uses Japanese flavors, right? I mean, dashi is in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Shokoji is in everything, right? So it's exciting. It's exciting to kind of diverge. But you have to pay respect to the chefs the traditionalists who have just like nonstop trying to obtain perfection. Perfection is not a real thing. I don't think it's an actual real thing. It's something that you always aspire to. And that's
it's the pursuit.
Interesting.
Yeah. Look, that is a beautiful thing too. Someone who just is just maniacally focused on continually making that thing better. And it's the tiniest nuances, and they compound over time. Over the course of 30, 40 years, if you make, a 0.1% improvement in the rice over the course of 40 years, that's you can have some pretty incredible rice. And I think that's a beautiful thing too. But it's also just necessary to have other approaches, right? That you have other diverging ways of eating this food. Otherwise, to be honest, it gets a little boring, right? And you can only have so many places that are that.
Yeah, for me, it gets boring, but obviously that works. Those sushi restaurants are still really busy, still really hard to get into, and still really expensive. And if I stayed on that path, I could have been the same. But it's just this is my journey, and this is where it's going, and I just find it a little more exciting for myself. Yeah.
What do you think are some like the biggest misconceptions about sushi in America?
The biggest one is fresh is best. That's still the biggest one.
Yeah, just not understanding that like when you freeze a piece of fish on the boat, it's going to be far better than if you catch it and then wait a day.
No, not necessarily that. It's more about the aging process. Like you can.
Yeah, gotcha.
You can age a fish.
Mm-hmm.
Like I dry age my tuna up to 5 weeks, and it only makes it better. And
yeah,
it's as a chef, it's so interesting. And then even in Japan, at the peak of omakase chefs, they tend to age their fish a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like picked up and cut and served that day. The top ones age a little, and those top chefs, if you read their like Jiro, he'll say like on day 5, this is when I serve my shimaji or something like that. Those nuances. So it's interesting. And in here in America, it's most people just think like, and most of the world, they think it's like, oh yeah, it's caught, flown over, cut up, served. But that's not necessarily the best. It is very good. I mean, and it's definitely leaves a lot less room for error, right?
Yeah.
It's not the best.
What's the guy's name? I saw this guy do a demo at the Chef's Roll Conference, the Anticon, and he did this demo on dry-aged fish. I think he's based in LA, or maybe he's based in.
Do
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. The Joint Seafood. The Joint.
Yeah. What's his name? I have to look.
I think it's Leeway.
His name. Yeah.
I met him. I hung out with him.
It was awesome.
I went to LA and he cut me up a bunch of tuna and salmon and like sea bream.
It was so good.
It was delicious. He's like, this is 3 weeks. This is 4 weeks.
That's a hard operation, by the way, like dry aging to then sell to the restaurants, because the timing of all of that, that was what to be honest, that's what I found most fascinating. I mean, the fish was insanely delicious, but like his process of how he times everything that comes in, of when it's going to get to a customer, and like the levers he has to pull of like which things age at which point, because he ages everything. So it can't just come in and sell it. He's got to, time that really well. That's a hard business.
You should have him on the show. He's so knowledgeable about that. And his business is, I went there. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It's
pretty impressive.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I do want to talk a little bit about the sobriety, because
sure. Yeah.
I know it started to sort of hit a peak, a few years ago. And I mean, that has been super tough. I mean, COVID, I have to imagine, had a big impact on that.
Yeah, that was definitely a catalyst.
Yeah.
or the effects of COVID.
Before we get into that, I'm just curious now because clearly, like drinking helps, like to manage stress and all the stress of the restaurant and the COVID or not having a restaurant or whatever those things are. A big part of, and I'm speculating here, but like of getting sober is you have to find some other way to manage that stress. Is there something that you do today that sort of replaced the drinking?
I would say therapy is huge, just for a foundation. You need therapy. I think everyone could use it.
Yeah.
Just makes life better. But after doing a lot of therapy, after finding sobriety, honestly, I work out. Like that's my hobby when I'm not working, like in the morning, or I hang out with my girlfriend and we go eat or do something. But the best way I've found to manage and deal with stress is managing it. It's like actually managing it and being on top of it. Like the stresses in your life that you're anxious about, I don't want to be anxious about it. I need to address it. And that's really hard sometimes. And, most people want to numb that and they just want to drink or get high or something to just like kind of alleviate that, right? You don't want to face the thing that's causing the stress that is causing you to drink more or like want to go party. When that was removed from me, I had to start addressing things.
Yeah.
And that is how I manage it. I have more sit downs with people if I need to, or, I just try to keep communication open much better. And I just try to also personally live my life better so I don't cause any problems. I don't have to apologize for anything or.
It's a big part of why I asked that because I've seen people that, they stop doing drugs or drinking and then they're just like maniacally into exercise and they exercise like, 3 hours a day, every day or into some other thing. And it's better in that, you're doing something that's healthier than drinking, but it's such a great point that you make that, the only way to have a healthy way to manage the stress is to actually make space for it and talk about it and be in it, which I'm terrible at, by the way. That's why like trying to, work with therapists on them because they're like, that's probably why you work all the time and then exercise because all those things mean you don't have to deal with what you're thinking. And I think that's probably why it's so sustainable the way you're approaching sobriety because you have a therapist and you are like, you didn't find some other like
another ism
replacement. Yeah.
The isms. I mean, I'm public about this, so I don't mind saying it. I go to AA. I mean, AA has been a huge part and like, I never thought I'd go to something like that, right? Because they're usually in churches and I'm not a religious person. But I have to admit, like, it just teaches you how to live life better, like just how to deal with resentments, it's mainly dealing with resentment. Yeah. A lot of it, a ton of it. Yeah. Or just being upset at someone or yourself. And how do you deal with that? And the best way to deal with it actually is to you address it.
Yeah. It's so true, man.
It's the only way, right?
It's the hardest way.
Someone, you should talk about it.
Yeah.
And what I found in the past 3 years is the situations that I thought were going to be so explosive, just like, oh my God, the world's going to end if I have this conversation with X person or Y person. 99% of the time, that doesn't happen. That's narrow. Yeah. Everything's fine. If anything, it gets better. Or you decide to part ways, whatever. But that's it. It never explodes. It's not like you're arguing and yelling at each other. No, it's like you're just having conversation. I mean, that's also on you. Like you have to also, know how to tame yourself and your temper. But the best way to do it is just if you got a problem or you're feeling something, you should communicate that. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I mention this too often now, but I have this picture frame back there.
Oh, what's in it? What is it?
Seneca's a Stoic philosopher. And I love this quote. I have it in as many places as possible. And it basically just says, we suffer more in imagination than reality. Yeah. And it's exactly what you just said, right? We create so much of this stress and anxiety in our heads. And then that creates more stress. And then that creates more. Yeah. When you think about it, when you play the thing out, you're like, this isn't that big of a thing. We just need to talk about it. I do think it's awesome that you see a therapist. And I totally agree. Everybody should, because it's just, to address these problems, you just need to make space for them. And a therapist is just someone you pay to make space for talking about your problems. You have your friends for that too. You kind of don't want to do it with your wife or your girlfriend because there's a bias there. and you can, but there's, anytime there's like some real bias because of the relationship, it's tough. So like you're just basically paying somebody to make space for the shit that you want to deal with.
Well,
so I agree. Everybody should.
Definitely. But also what you're doing is, I mean, I'll complain to my friends sometime if I need to, or my girlfriend, but there's some things that aren't for them. Right.
Yeah.
And you should tell them what's bothering you, but you can't expect them to find you a solution. And that puts it on them. And someone who is professionally trained and has the experience of dealing with so many situations from other people and seeing how it plays out, just like you and I have worked in kitchens and we know the situations and how it plays out. Like they know it well on just how someone having a mental breakdown or this stressor in life, how it may play out. So that's what I think is critical, is like having that professional who you can tell anyone and they can't tell anybody, right? They're not allowed to tell anybody. You can tell them anything and they can help you, or at least they can listen to you and not be annoyed that they have to listen to you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it can be annoying if you have...
I'm sure they're annoyed sometimes, but that's what they're paid for.
No, I mean like if you're like girlfriend or your wife or your friend, like if you complain all the time, that gets annoying.
Yeah, of course. Right. And it's a burden it's a burden that isn't necessarily fair anyways to put on them all the time. And that's why I definitely think a therapist is just a great thing for anybody to have for that same reason. And sometimes honestly, like just saying the thing gives you like 50% of the relief. Having a place where you could just like say the thing.
Absolutely.
I had a therapist like a long time ago that I was annoyed about because like I would tell her this problem and I'm like, okay, let's figure out how to solve it. She's like, nah, just talk about it. I'm like, no, what do you mean? Let's figure out. And she said, no, I just want you to say them today. I'm like, that's dumb, but actually it did help a bunch. So.
You got to find the right therapist for you.
Yeah.
People like 100%. Us, like, we want to solve things, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to ask you, like, what's next for you? It sounds like this restaurant, this new izakaya is next for you. Is that like already in the works? Do you already have the lease signed?
Yeah, lease is signed. We announced it publicly, I think 3 weeks ago, just because the liquor license placard went up for transfer, which shows our LLC, which is, you can and see my name on it. We're like a year out. It's probably next spring or next summer.
How you feeling about it?
I mean, it's so far out where it's almost like not real yet, but it's also, we meet every week or more than once a week about it. And we're conceptualizing and designing it. It's very exciting. I am really excited. I feel like this is the right move. I have had offers for so long, all these years to open more, and you usually see people just keep opening, right? After you open one, the next year they open two or something. I waited 7 or 8 years to do this. It just had to be the right move. And Royal's at a good place right now in terms of culture and staffing and like experience and systems. Systems are huge. So, we can also transfer those systems to the new place. That's a big part of it. So I feel really excited about this. I can't wait. It's also in Rittenhouse, which I live in. I live in Center City. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with Philadelphia, but I live like a block and a half from where this restaurant.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And it's in the hub of the city, whereas Royal's it's on Front Street, which is First Street next to Jersey, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a destination still almost, where this is right in the middle.
Yeah. How far apart are they from each other if you drove?
It's like 15-minute drive, 10-minute drive. Yeah.
Oh, that's not bad at all. Yeah. It's always tough when the second restaurant's really far away.
Yeah, like I got offers to open like in New York, Boston, DC. I'm like, no, I don't want to jump on a train or a plane to get to my other restaurant. You have to be mobile, be able to be there all the time.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I'm excited for the second opening, though I'm going to come to Royals for the first time soon. That's how close. It's pretty quick to get to Philly from New York.
I have a lot of regulars who just take the train in for their reservation. They go home. You got to come in. Let me know. Yeah,
well, this was great, man. I appreciate the time. I know you got to get back to doing the thing. I'm glad we finally found some time for this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating. Don't settle. Make today a little bit better than yesterday. And remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.